Hey folks, this is Ham, the Guinness Gamer here, bringing you more Ashes of Creation content. This is going to be a summary of the live stream that Stephen Sheriff did with the Ashen Forge on Sunday the 9th of July. Before I get into it, I would just like to request that if you like this video, if you want to go on ahead and drop me a like and a subscribe down below, I would really appreciate it. If there's any comments you would like to add, anything you want me to cover in the future, or any further clarification on anything that I've discussed in this video, please leave a comment underneath as well. But as for that, let's get right into the summary. So the first thing that was discussed in great detail was the freeholds, of course, because the most recent development update there in June was all about freeholds. So this is also quite informative regarding that. If you haven't seen my development update summary, I have a separate video about it that summarizes that 2-hour long official Ashes of Creation development update. But the first thing here that was covered then was the resources needed to produce or to build a freehold. Now, first of all, you need gold, which you would expect. You also need construction materials, but the third thing then that you need is certificates. And certificates, that's not the final name. The devs have a separate name for that will be in the final game, but it's the only name we know for them for now. And the certificates are character bound. Now, access to your freehold will only be through the family and guild system, so there's no randoms that are allowed, no randomers that are allowed into your freehold to use. That is to use your profession stations and things like that. It's strictly just for your family and your guild. There's questions then as well about bidding for the freeholds. At the minute, this is in development, and with everything that Stephen says, everything is subject to change because it's a game in active development, and that's something that's always very important to remember. There'll be things I discuss in this video now that may well be changed a few months down the line. But when you're bidding for a freehold, there's two options at the minute that the devs are exploring. The first one is just to build straight for gold, which is straightforward. The second one is to use a mixture of both gold and those character bound certificates that I mentioned before. And those character bound certificates, they're earned by performance. Now, what I mean by that is, it will be node linked, in that, for example, for a religious node, and there's going to be, in all nodes there seems to be going to be some kind of honor system, and in the religious node in particular, it will be called a favor system. In that favor system, then you will actually be able to earn favor, and then you can utilize that favor to actually buy the certificates that you need for the freehold. To acquire the favor in the religious node example, there's a few different ways. The first way is by participating in religious quest lines. You can also do repeatable activities, and you can also turn in materials to certain NPCs, presumably. Next thing then, freeholds will get released over time by the devs when the server is when the server goes online. So that'll obviously stop there being any kind of throttling or high and low demand of different freeholds. They'll fully control that, and so the devs will fully control that system, but they'll also fully control the character bound certificates and all of that. None of that will be, players won't be able to change that too much. Also, one thing about freeholds, skins can be used anywhere on freeholds, no matter what node or biome your parcel of land is in. And there's a bit of work to do around the artwork in that, but that's the underlying intention. Then parcels of land will never touch each other, so there's no capability of freehold bonuses sharing between several freeholds. So the actual parcel of land that you place your freehold on, it doesn't even touch another parcel of land, so you can't put your freehold right in the corner and somebody else put their freehold right in the corner and then be touching each other. That won't be possible at all. The last thing then that was revealed, I suppose, for freeholds was that there will be a maximum of 6 profession and business buildings on the freehold, and then 1 house as well. So the house is separate from that, so 7 buildings. And that sounds like that doesn't actually include the likes of the shed, or the farm, or the animal husbandry plots. A couple of features that were revealed in this live stream to be available in Alpha 2 then was all archetypes other than the summoner will be available for testing, for play testing in Alpha 2. The character creator will also be available at the start of Alpha 2. Some guild management functions will be available at the start of Alpha 2, and then also the naval combat and ship production system will be available at some point in Alpha 2 as well. Another element of AOC that was covered in this live stream was citizenship. Now you can only be a citizen of one node. You have to own a house in that node to be able to be eligible to be a citizen in that node. But you can also own housing in different nodes. You can own different types of housing. So of course this means then that if you can only be a citizen in one node, you can elect to be a citizen in whichever node you want out of where you own the housing. So you choose. There's nothing automatic about it. And also then there'll be citizenship dues, which are higher taxes, kind of that they'll be due for the node that you're a citizen of, and those higher taxes, increase based on the size of property that you have, if you have a bigger property, and also when you enter a node citizenship. So it sounds like if you get in at the early stages of a node, you will pay less citizen dues for presumably forever, but I am assuming that. Another thing that was mentioned then was corruption. Corruption won't really affect freeholds, so that's good to know. But the intent is then for corruption to be dynamic and spread over the world, and they're still actively working on that, on how they can get that to come to fruition. Corruption continues into the open seas. So the same debuffs apply out in the open seas as applies anywhere else. It's the same across all different types of land. And finally then about corruption, about open seas, there's a non-corrupted death penalty on open seas, but it's a mitigated form of your normal death penalty. You'll still get a debuff on death, you'll still get degradation, but there is little to no experience debt accrued. Now, which of those it is, whether there's none or whether there's very little, that's subject to testing, and they haven't decided yet about that, or came to an answer about that. While talking about the open seas, there is no longer a shipbuilding profession. This has been spread across several different professions. You build ships using a blueprint and multiple components that have been crafted then by different professions. You can name your ships and you can own more than one ship, and some node sieging may include the ability for naval combat. They're having a bit of issue with trying to test that and make it fair, how ships would compared to the normal sieging of a node. So what they seem to be settling on is that there'll be such a thing as a harbour in certain nodes, and the harbour ultimately will end up probably being an objective in the objective based element of sieging. Now on to the equipment system. This was discussed briefly as well. There are different types of equipment that are different relevancies for different types of content, for certain content. Armor gear sets are specialized for certain content. Weapons have a passive stat progression linked to your character kit. Specific gear is also more relevant for certain classes as well as for certain content. And last thing then, this may be more enchanting related, but equipment can be destroyed by over enchanting it, but only at high levels of enchanting. At lower levels, the drawback for failure is less than full destruction. Now, there's also a number of kind of random wee bits of information that I couldn't quite categorize too well, so I'm just going to run through the various little nuggets that were dropped here to finish off. The static and in-node housing will have the ability to grow and have gatherables. Not processing stations, but just furniture such as a flower pot that will take certain seeds and you can grow it and harvest it then in your house. Farming and animal husbandry will also be available in public places, such as renting a plot, but only up to a certain level. You'll never get to a master or grandmaster. By doing that, you will need the freehold for that. There are no built-in blocks to stop people accessing your tavern, which is interesting. And this, in my mind, I had this discussion with some of my future guild members. My mind that might link in, or a couple of them mentioned that might link in to player created NPCs. Now this is purely hypothetical here, so we're not sure, but it could be a possibility then if you're not able to stop people from, with a hard block stopping people access your tavern, you imagine that is probably to encourage PvP for a start, but there may be an option for you to possibly have NPC guards of some kind, and they can then also help, marshal or bouncers as they're called over here, for the front door of the pub. They could be there to keep out people that you don't want, keep out the riffraff. The player NPCs do exist, and the ones that have been confirmed, or Stephen just confirmed in this live stream, is you can get ones that might rotate your crops for you or plant your crops for you, and they'll be fully controlled by the player, and they'll work similar to the pet system. But every player controlled NPC has its own functions, so I could see then that lends itself to a possibility of a whole number of different player created NPCs, including, as I say, maybe the likes of a guard for your freehold, or a guard for your or mercenaries even for your tavern. Another thing then that was mentioned was the possibility for processing degradation, but currently taxation is the only maintenance mechanic. So taxation, similar to the homes I mentioned earlier, taxation actually increases as you progress your freeholds and your stations. Farming and animal husbandry are both subject to diminishing returns. You don't always get seeds from harvesting plants or babies from animals, so this is designed to encourage you to constantly have to return out into the world and maybe harvest those seeds or capture those animals. However, mounts won't degrade or die. There is a stable system that will limit the amount of mounts you have, but there hasn't been much information yet released about the stable system. There may be some opportunity for summons specializing those summons in the same way that animal husbandry animals are customized visually. That's probably part of the reason why summoners aren't going to be available in Alpha 2 like everybody else is, or at the start of Alpha 2 certainly, and like all the other archetypes are. There's an element more complexity with balancing and things revolving around a summoner. Next thing then is the Tulner models may be available this year, but they'll not be playable until next year. Classes will have both solo synergy between the two archetypes and synergy with other players. What comes to mind there then is the likes of a status effect that you might be able to put onto an enemy character, and another class then is able to get an extra bonus, an extra crit bonus or something like that onto that NPC because of the status effect that you've put onto them. You can't kill non-combat NPCs. Combat NPCs can be killed in sieges, and this can have ramifications for further down the line. Nodes have different cultures, and this can change some quest lines and content in those nodes, but it won't change them all. There'll be just certain parts that change based on who owns the node and what the overall culture there is. The siege system leaves ruins behind that act as open world battlegrounds, and this allows attackers and defenders to salvage equipment for a finite amount of time after this is after a successful siege, after the node has been destroyed. And last thing then is apartments are default structures in every node type. There are upgrade paths for apartments in nodes for the mayor to adjust, and that's something then that obviously the mayor will be one of the many different things that the mayor will be prioritizing or not prioritizing, and that will impact how many people stay on the node and how many people want to stay on the node, etc, etc. So I've tried to keep this summary as short and as sweet as possible. If you, as I said at the start, if you want to give me a like and a subscribe, I would much appreciate it. But for now, wherever you are, enjoy your day, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.